Yes.
If you don't want to use those services, there is an open and unmediated internet that you are allowed to publish whatever you'd like on. But if you're going to use a social network that's created by somebody else, then you are beholden to their rules.
Sure. You see the issue here, right? You're the one who has a problem with their rules. Really glad to have our next guest. I think he thinks that I'm the boogeyman. That's usually what people think when they come on this show if they don't necessarily come from the same political persuasion. You can follow him on Twitter at Josh Constine. He's a writer for TechCrunch. Mr. Constine, thank you for being here, sir.
Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you. Now, are you here out of your own free will, or do we need to notify the authorities? Is someone putting the lotion on its skin there? That background looks a little...
Yeah, I'm here on my own volition. I'm hoping to have a good civil discussion about some really important topics.
Okay, so you are in fact, this is your own basement.
No, this is the TechCrunch office.
Oh, okay. All right. So I see. Just boosting morale and what have you. Listen, Josh, I wanted to talk with you because I saw your article up here at TechCrunch, and it was titled "Silenced by Free Speech," in which you were putting forth, I don't want to misrepresent you, you're putting forth, I guess, some solutions, assertions regarding the policing, the treatment of speech on social media platforms. I'm not going to lie, I come at this from the other point of view, so I'd love to hear what it is, I guess, in your own words, you were asserting with the article.
Yeah, so modern social networks, there's just a fundamental incongruency with being completely and unabashedly open to all forms of replies, insults, and harassment, and being a place for civil discussion of important issues. While free speech is critically important, that right was not designed in mind with people being able to come to you, shout in your face, and say these are their beliefs. Everyone is welcome to speak their own beliefs, but I don't think other people are necessarily obligated to listen or have that speech come into their house, whether you call that somebody coming into your front door and screaming at you or coming to your Twitter profile and screaming at you. And so I believe that social networks need to do more to protect people from this kind of harassment. That's not protecting people from having their own points of view. Nobody should be censored for having those perspectives if they're tweeting them on their own profiles. But when it comes to replies, where a lot of this abuse happens, I think that there needs to be some changes made. And Twitter has announced a bunch of changes to promote safety on its platform, but none of them right now address the fundamental problem, which is in replies. And so in Silenced by Free Speech, I discuss how, some social networks have put up a defense that they're being completely pro-free speech, but in doing so, they're allowing harassers to actually silence other people by bullying them into being quiet. And so,
okay.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I don't want to jump, but you kind of unpacked a few things there. Do you mind if I ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
So you started off with the First Amendment. So I'm interested as to why you started off there and mentioned the founding fathers, mentioned how they couldn't have conceived sort of this interconnectivity as you put it in your article. First off, before we get off on that, do you believe this is a First Amendment issue or a Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube have the right to do what they want as a business issue? Because you start off asserting First Amendment wasn't designed with this technology in mind.
Yeah, this is about what Facebook and Twitter are doing on their platforms. As businesses, they are not beholden to unequivocally allow any type of speech.
Absolutely.
So that is where what I'm discussing here.
But then why would you? My question is, why would you start with First Amendment and then go into businesses have the right to do what they want to do? They're completely separate. They're unrelated. You invoke the First Amendment.
They're not unrelated, unfortunately, because these companies are saying that the First Amendment and free speech are why they're allowing this abuse. So okay. This is their rationale for not policing their platforms or for not protecting victims is that it's all part of free speech. They're the ones pointing to the First Amendment.
They're the ones pointing to the First Amendment, and that's why the first paragraph of your article and the first thing you mentioned is the First Amendment did not account for this technology. So that's your argument in response to their rationale. I just want to make sure I'm understanding this clearly.
Yes.
Okay. Let's do that first. Where does that line get drawn? Is it at the printing press? Is it with the typewriter? Is it with the computer? Is it with social media? Where does the First Amendment still apply?
The First Amendment applies to people's own speech.
Okay.
So that can be in many forms, but
so what would that have to do with technology, though? Because that's your assertion, is that it didn't take into account this interconnectivity, the technology that we currently have. So I'm just trying to clarify what your position is, because I'm not entirely clear in the article, and you went down a few different paths that I would like to explore. Then how does technology? It could not be less relevant.
Well, it's obviously very relevant because speech is conducted through technology nowadays. So I don't understand how you could think those things are totally separate.
They're separate based on what you just said, that someone has the right to say whatever they want, but then you say that the First Amendment didn't account for current technology. So I just asked you, where does it stop? And you just said it's in relation to your own speech. So does the First Amendment, for example, apply when you're using the telephone, speaking freely with your family members? Does it apply to a town crier?
It does.
Okay.
If you're talking to someone who consensually wants to speak with you on the phone, you're allowed to say whatever you want. But if you call someone at all hours of the night over and over again to scream at them, you can be charged for harassment.
Sure.
You can be charged for stalking.
Absolutely. And isn't it wonderful that with new media, social media like Facebook, Twitter, you can block, you can mute. I think that's the fundamental assertion that I disagree with here, your presupposition that people have to listen. Therefore, the people at the top, from the top down at Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, need to do something about it. No one's forced to use these applications, and no one has to listen. You can't, before caller ID, and you were on a rotary phone, someone called you, asked if your refrigerator was running, you had to say, damn it, and hang up and hope it didn't happen again. Now you know. You can block and mute.
Yeah, but if somebody kept calling you from different phone numbers every day, a different phone number, you couldn't block those, right?
But that's already a violation of the rules.
Exactly, but you couldn't block those phone numbers. You're saying that blocking is fine, but if I called you from a different phone number every day, you couldn't block those, right?
I assume that you're obviously drawing a connection here to sock accounts, to bot accounts, to creating multiple accounts for harassment campaigns, because I know you've written about that, and I would agree with you, but that's already a violation of the rules. You're suggesting new rules and stricter enforcement. So I guess my question here is, you say that free speech isn't free if someone is intimidated by somebody else's speech. Am I misrepresenting what you've said there, or is that the general premise?
No, you're misrepresenting me. It's not about whether someone is offended. People are welcome to say views that offend other people, but when you start to directly reply to people, when you're shoving that perspective in somebody else's face, it becomes different. It's not about, oh, you're in the street saying your point of view. If that's so, I can just walk away. But if every day you create a new Twitter account and reply to me and put those messages into my timeline, into my replies and mentions, it's different. Well, it isn't allowed to do it on one account, but that hasn't stopped anyone from creating new accounts to do that harassment every day. Well, so that's why I'm saying that the current block options are inadequate.
Okay. Well, again, but that's not really what you're writing about in your article. You're talking about new
rules. No, it's exactly what I'm writing about in my article.
I would encourage people to go read it over there at TechCrunch. Fully automatic weapons are already heavily regulated, right? Someone can buy a semi-automatic weapon and transform it. That's illegal. It doesn't change the fact that it's illegal. It's already illegal to create targeted harassment campaigns online. It's already illegal to stalk somebody online. People get banned for these offenses. And the important thing is, for example, threatening somebody, grievous bodily harm, or calling people to violent action, or continually targeting, harassing. The reason that these policies are in place and aren't allowed is because they mirror directly our laws. It's illegal to do that. Going a step further beyond that, which you suggest in your article, then that becomes, as you discuss it, censoring. These were your words, not mine. Then you kind of become the thought police.
Yeah, I'm not asking anyone to be the thought police. I'm just saying that if you force people to register their accounts to a phone number, then when somebody is banned, like you said, then that ban actually sticks. Mm-hmm. What you're saying is that the ban works fine right now, and it doesn't. You know that. You know that anyone can create a second account anonymously, and they can harass somebody again, even if they were banned yesterday. And so, yes, I'm saying that people should have to register their accounts to a phone number, which makes it much more difficult to create new accounts to continue that harassment after they've been banned for breaking the rules.
Right. So now we're moving forward with solutions. And I appreciate that you actually put forth a solution. You think that a policy should be an account directly tied to a phone number.
That's at least one way to improve the condition by increasing friction to creating new harassment accounts.
Okay.
Other ways to do that, other signals would be requiring that people have been on the service for a long enough period of time, or that they don't have any other signals, that they haven't been reported for other violations.
Sure. Do you support ANTIFA being on Twitter or Facebook?
That has nothing to do with this topic right now.
It has everything to do with it. What about Black Lives Matter? What about Fight for 15?
I do support Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
But yeah,
now,
but
considering that many of these people...
groups about this, specific group, but I'm not aligned with every single person or every action. So
can I finish my just line of question?
To there seems disingenuous. So
no,
why don't we talk about
I'm not trying to tie your opinion to theirs, because I know for a fact that you've supported these groups being on these social media platforms. So do I, by the way. But again, unpopular speech, I have a problem with anonymity, by the way. It breeds cowardice. We can both agree on that. But unpopular speech is speech that often needs to be protected most. So let's take Antifa, Black Lives Matter, Fight for 15, for example. They very often, most often, aren't tied to an individual person and phone number account. Should we shut down all local chapters of Antifa on Twitter because it's anonymous? There's no person attached to it?
It's not about anonymity. It's about harassment.
You just said the solution was a phone number. So if someone wants to remain anonymous, if someone wants to protect themselves, I'm using an example, a very clear example of which we would have some kind of precedent here. Organizations that don't set a phone number, that don't attach a private address or name to it, should they be removed?
Well, if they create a new account and they've been suspended for breaking the rules, then yeah, if they want to be able to continue to reply to people. But the problem is rarely that these groups are called. The trouble is when people are replying specifically to specific actors, and that's where the abuse comes from. So just because an account is anonymous or is tweeting their own perspectives on either side of the aisle, on either side of an issue, that's not the problem. The problem is abuse directed at specific people.
Sure.
And that's what the rules that I proposed would help to combat.
So we've just abandoned the idea that you would need a phone number to be attached to a Twitter account to be created. That wouldn't apply to groups.
No, but if you want to create a new Twitter account, if you want to be able to
how would you know if it's a new account if you didn't already register with a phone number? Right,
well, if you want to be able to continue to reply to people after being reported, then yeah, you would need to register an account.
So is the standard? I want to make sure is the standard reporting.
A lot of these groups have groups of admins.
Is the standard reporting, because you've written extensively about mass flagging and mass reporting campaigns occurring from the alt-right. You've written about this.
Sure.
People have talked about this. So the standard that you just used, not me, is being reported, and you need a phone number. Now you've said, well, no, you wouldn't need a phone number. It's if you're replying and if you've been reported. So let's say a group like Antifa has no phone number attached, or Black Lives Matter, or Fight for 15, or whatever it is, the SEIU, no phone number attached. This is an organization. They've replied. They've been reported as harassing. Remove them?
It would depend on whether they were actually found to have been harassing someone, not if they've been reported.
This is where we're going. Who determines this? What's your solution? How do we fix that? Who determines what is and is not an infringement of someone else's speech based on level of offense?
These services need to put forward clear terms of service that dictate what is an offense that is bannable or causes a suspension. It's not very hard to realize that the people who are controlling these services need to put rules in place. Yes, and the rules currently are inadequate. They certainly are not preventing abuse, as we're hearing about these abuse problems all the time. So obviously they need to improve their rules.
So you just said people. So you would advocate for human input.
Yeah, you're gonna have to have humans to write these rules. There's no robot that's going to write this for you. I don't understand the question.
Okay, well, let me clarify the question. Assume I'm a dummy. It's algorithmic or there's human input. So Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, for example, have argued that it's not the byproduct of human input. They vehemently argued that it's algorithmic. Now, of course, people on the right.
What is algorithmic?
So, of course, people on the right. Let me finish what I'm saying here. I appreciate it. I'll let you answer. They've said it's not human input. As someone personally who was, I think your site actually wrote about this, TechCrunch. I certainly know it was written about at Engadget and Gizmodo when Facebook was found to have had human input determining pages that had to be throttled and could not be viewed. There was Ted Cruz for president, Chris Kyle Foundation, and yours truly. And we had to settle this legally. So I've been through this. I've experienced it. I've experienced the wrath of human input when said human doesn't like what you have to say. Do you see how dangerous it would be to simply give over the rights in this capacity just to someone who can change, by the way? It should change on any given month. What if someone doesn't like what you have to say next month instead of me?
You're confusing completely different issues. You're talking about trending topics on Facebook, which had human curators that looked at what was surfaced by the algorithms.
No,
and then
that's
you're
not it.
somehow comparing that to the rules about harassment. Those are just totally two different things.
Well, no, they're not. They're not, because you talked about people replying. So we've gone away from phone numbers. We've gone away from reporting
right,
because you said
trending topics to replies.
No, Josh.
Right.
You said that humans would have to determine if it was a violation or not. Did you not?
Well, humans
Josh?
would have to write the rules.
Josh, did you not? Did you not say that a human would have to determine if it was a violation of the guidelines or not? Josh, yes or no?
I said that humans have to write the rules.
Yes, you want human input. So can you see the problems with, because you keep trying to move away from it. You made that point. I'm not making it up. People can go back to the tail of the tape. So you were advocating for human input. Could you not see how that might be problematic based on the fact that humans have inherent biases?
Yeah, humans do have inherent biases, but if you want to write rules for a social network, no robot is going to write those rules for you.
I never said they should.
I don't
Josh.
understand. How do you
Josh, I never said they should.
You propose on the other side, we would create rules for dictating how harassment was treated, but the rules were written by algorithms. That's like a science fiction.
I never said
you
the
don't
rules.
understand.
I never said the rules should be written by algorithms. And I know that tech is kind of your one card to play, so you want to go back to that. I want to go back to what it is that you said. A human should determine what is a violation of these guidelines. You said a human would have to go in, because I said, what if the alt-right people mass flagged reported it?
Rules that are applied evenly and consistently across the service.
And you are advocating more human input, correct?
I'm advocating for human input to write rules that are then enforced both by algorithms and by human moderators.
Yes, exactly. So you were advocating for more human input. There we go. We've answered that question, both on rules, which wasn't my point, but determining what is and what is not abuse. So alt-right doesn't like what you have to say. They report you. Human happens to be sympathetic to the alt-right, you're removed. My position here is they already have rules in place that mirror the law. There's one person here. There's one person here who's advocating for more than regulations that would mirror the law. That's yourself. And I haven't really heard a justification for it. Again, you're willing to give these freedoms up online to a human to determine what is and what is not offensive. And it's based on the premise that you've written about, that freedom of speech is not free if your free speech or my free speech silences or intimidates someone else from speaking freely. This is the premise of your article. And I've heard it taught at colleges across the country. What determines, or who determines, since you've decided it should be a who determines what is and is not okay to say. We're not talking about harassment. It's already not allowed. We're not talking about doxing. It's already not allowed. We're talking about offensive speech online, which would be considered a violation of someone else's free speech. Who decides, and what is this violation?
The owners of the services that you're using for free.
Yes.
If you don't want to use those services, there is an open and unmediated internet that you are allowed to publish whatever you'd like on. But if you're going to use a social network that's created by somebody else, then you are beholden to their rules.
Sure. You see the issue here, right? You're the one who has a problem with their rules.
Right. The rules currently don't protect people from harassment sufficiently.
Right. So I'm asking you, what new rules
need to be written?
What new rules? And how do we enforce them? What new rules and who enforces them? Let's zone in on this. What should be considered right now? What should be considered offensive enough speech, in your opinion, to be removed from the platform?
Unconsensual nudity, threats of violence.
Unconsensual nudity is allowed and legal on a platform. Sending dick pics or sending pornography is allowed because last I checked, that's a violation of the current services on Twitter and Facebook.
What I'm saying is that, yeah, but the rules are not being properly enforced, nor are they strong enough. And so this week, Twitter announced that it was creating stronger rules to more expressly forbid unconsensual nudity, threats of violence, and use by hate groups that have used violence in the past to get their way.
Sure, yeah.
It's pretty clear.
So, yeah, right, exactly. But your article isn't about the rules, the current rules. You're proposing new rules. You're talking about speech, not just sending nudity. So I want to know about speech. What determines
where abuse happens? And I'm saying that if somebody is reported and found to have been abusive, then they should not be allowed to reply to other accounts with that abuse.
Sure. So outside of nudity or current violations of their service, you wouldn't consider it to be abuse then. For example, if I respond something that somebody doesn't like, they may deem offensive, we would both agree that's not something that should be a violation of use.
That depends on context. It depends on what you're saying and how you phrase it.
Okay, so, current rules. What additional rules? You write civility is a tightrope between chaos and censorship. You talk about needing new rules and enforcing them. What new rules and how would they be enforced by whom? You just said you don't have to use their...
that abuse people can't
What is
reply
abuse?
to other
What is
people.
abuse?
You feel like talking slower makes your point
What
smarter,
is
but you
abuse,
don't.
Josh? What is abuse, Josh? Who determines abuse? Okay, let's do this. Give me an example.
We just did. We just went through it.
It's already illegal. You propose new rules in your article. You propose offensive speech be limited, not nudity, not threatening with violence. So what would be abuse? What right now that is allowed would you disallow? Because that's what you're advocating for. I'm just trying to get a straight answer. Give me an example.
When somebody replies to your account and tells you that they want to hurt you, that they want to hurt your family, and they say awful, unspeakable words to you, and they reply to you every day, and then you report them and they get banned, and then they create a new account and they do that same thing the next day, so that every time you open Twitter, you see that content, no matter how many accounts you ban. That's the kind of rule that I'm trying to that I'm advocating for.
It already exists.
It doesn't, because this happens all the time to people. And if
people commit murder all the time, Josh, does that mean murder is legal? This isn't legal. People need to read your own article. You were advocating new rules. I'm not talking about enforcement.
For murder, then you can't create a new life the next day and then go murder someone again.
That could not be less relevant to the point, Josh. The point is, Josh,
and social networks operate differently than the real world, and I think that that's a problem.
Actually, I do. You're the one who doesn't understand what the First Amendment is, apparently, because you go to the founding and the First Amendment and how it couldn't possibly take into account today's interconnectivity. You're the one who invokes the First Amendment. I fully understand how people operate on Twitter and Facebook. My grandmother does when she sends forwards of prairie dogs' testicles, okay? This is not a tech issue just because you write for TechCrunch. We're talking about a freedom of speech issue. These rules already exist. If you commit murder, you get punished. If you send nudity on Twitter, if you commit harassment, you get banned to the best of their abilities. Some get through, just like OJ got through. You're advocating new rules, saying that the rules are not enough, and that people... need to be, in your own words, you discuss the class hierarchy. So let's get to that. Systems of oppression. You talk about white men versus black children. Let's go to that example that you wrote about in your article so that we don't get wishy-washy. Give that example to our audience, why it's a problem and what you think Facebook or Twitter should do about it.
Those are Facebook's rules, and if you want to quote my article, you're welcome to.
Okay. So you talk about how, for example, in your article, white men would be protected under Facebook, where if you write something negative about white men, that could be removed, correct?
That is Facebook's perspective.
Right. Well, you write about that. And then you complain that black children simultaneously would not be protected, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
black
why
children,
is that a problem?
Because Facebook says that if you have a protected class that is protected against discrimination, which includes things like race, ethnicity, religion, but that term is combined with an unprotected class like age, then suddenly the whole statement is not protected under its abuse rules. And so, yeah, I think that just because somebody says that someone is a white old man, that they shouldn't be subject to abuse when white man is not allowed to be abused. And that seems pretty clear, pretty simple to me, right? Like if somebody was like, all white grandmas are terrible, but don't you think that should be that's abuse, or especially when all white people are awful, that is abuse? The line differentiating those makes no sense, and Facebook has implemented that rule system, but it just needs to be improved.
Okay. Now, the reason I bring this up is because when I bring up examples from your article, you move to a different example. This is a concrete example we can use, and I think it's disingenuous. You can tell me if you think I'm wrong. So you say white men would be protected, black children would not.
I'm not saying that. This is
question.
Facebook's rule.
Yeah, I know. And you have a problem with the rule and its current implementation, as you just expressed very articulately. So white men is protected, black children are not. Let me ask you this. Is black men protected?
Yeah, black men is protected.
What about white children?
Not protected.
So you kind of injected race into an issue where it was irrelevant to the current rules on Facebook.
No,
the issue isn't black-white. Again, if your issue, I want to clarify it and I'll be reductive. We can do that. If you think Facebook needs to, yes, I'm sure. I know that you did. If your point is that Facebook doesn't take into account ageism, fine. But you use an example of a white man and black children. And that's a disingenuous example, as though Facebook in any capacity is somehow marginalizing people of color.
Do you think that those two groups deserve equal protection?
I don't think that ageism is the same as race. I don't think that age is as relevant, and clearly Facebook doesn't. I don't think it's I think it's a very disingenuous example.
So you're agreeing
for you to
that,
say white males are protected and black children aren't.
So you're agreeing that people being abused based on their race isn't okay?
We didn't discuss anyone being abused here. We're not discussing direct abuse. We are discussing, you mentioned classes who would be protected on Facebook and who wouldn't. You said white men would, black children wouldn't. The fact is white children wouldn't and black men would.
This is not
exactly. It's not a racial issue. But you write consistently about racial issues and minorities who need to be protected. And I understand where you're coming from as more of a leftist. You just said Black Lives Matter, definitely on Twitter, even if they don't have phone numbers. So my question becomes, you've also mentioned actors. I think you've talked about Leslie Jones before. Can we acknowledge that maybe systems of power are different than just race, gender? Maybe Leslie Jones has more power to harass with her millions of followers than a straight white cis male who only has a handful.
No, abuse is about the way that people use the platform, not how many people follow it.
The potential for abuse. Because you've talked about power and systems of power.
If somebody has hate in their heart. So, yeah, it doesn't matter how many followers you have. If you say hateful things, you're abusive.
You've talked systemically about social media entities needing to assist with and protect marginalized classes, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So my point is this. Abuses of power can be significantly more harmful with someone who may be a black female, like, let's say, Leslie Jones, and she creates a targeted harassment campaign, or take your pick, as opposed to a straight, cis, white male. Should that not be taken into account equally when enforcing these rules?
No, the content of the abuse should be what's focused on.
Assuming the content is this. Well, no, because you write in your article about marginalized classes and systems of oppression and how you have not done enough to correct this. How white males need to do more to correct this. Correct? Incorrect?
So do you think that you have less power despite your ethnicity and your gender than Leslie Jones because she has more Twitter followers?
Absolutely.
You think that because she has more Twitter followers,
yes. Let me answer.
You're subject to less
Let me
abuse.
do the opposite of what you're doing here, Josh.
On the street and see if
I don't need to. I can just go on.
By abuse.
I don't need to. I can just go on Twitter. We're talking about abuses of Twitter rules here, Josh. Remember, this is your article, not mine.
That's why we're
trying to create
Jones so that
be or not be able to abuse these guidelines more effectively and more powerfully than, say, my producer, myself? My point is, you use a disingenuous example, as we've just discussed, and you look at everything through the prism of race or gender. You're not taking everything into account, and you want people who share your opinion to be determined.
Through the lens of race and gender. I'm saying that abuse is abuse.
Okay. Abuse is abuse. So we've just acknowledged on the platform of Twitter that someone who would have significantly more power on Twitter would be capable of significantly greater abuses.
No, we're saying that the content of the abuse is what matters. It doesn't matter.
I'm assuming the content is the same. The content is the same. I'm doing the same kind of thing. A targeted harassment campaign. Leslie Jones is. Let's say.
Leslie Jones isn't, and you know that.
Okay, I'm using it as an example.
Abusive campaigns
you are
is
suggesting that it is. I didn't say she did, Josh.
So why don't you pick an alt-right figure who's coordinated one of these abuse campaigns, who has lots of followers, and you can use them as your example.
Okay, you pick one.
No, I'm saying you're the one who's picking random people.
You pick an example. You seem to have one in mind. I was using him as an example because you've written about Leslie Jones. So you pick an alt-right figure.
You're the one picking Leslie. So why don't you pick another figure?
I don't know. I'm not alt. I don't know. I'm not alt-right.
Who actually does abuse?
I don't know. I'm not alt-right. So you can pick one, and we could compare it and use a hypothetical scenario. Take anyone you want.
So you don't know, but you're just randomly picking random people. But you said you don't know.
No, I didn't randomly pick someone and say that she committed any kind of abuse on Twitter. I was talking about systems of power, as you write about in your article, saying that as a white male, you haven't done enough to correct this. You effectively call to action other white males to correct this injustice online. Correct or incorrect? Am I misrepresenting you there?
Yeah, I think people with power should speak up for victims and those who are abused.
And you believe that someone has more power simply because he is white and straight online than someone who has 800 times the followers and reach and financial backing?
No, what I'm saying is that the content of someone's abuse is what needs to be considered, not how many followers they have.
Yes, the content should be considered. So content being equal, let's say alt-right person, okay, does the exact same thing that, I don't know, Leslie Jones, let's say Will Smith, I don't know if he's on Twitter. I'm trying to take any minority here. I'm not attributing it to any specific minority. Maybe he's not on Twitter. I have no idea.
Maybe it's not about minority. Maybe you just pick 2 white people, one with more followers.
No, I'm picking it because it's your example where you call on people to fix these systems of oppression. You specifically call on Facebook, Twitter, and white male writers to rectify this situation. That's what you write about, based on race. Your entire article is written through the prism of race. And what I'm saying is when you're
not.
Yes.
You read race into everything, apparently. But yeah, I agree. White men do need to stand up for those who are abused.
Okay.
Do
and
you
don't
agree?
see that see that as a statement based entirely on race?
Do you agree that white men, who are some of the most powerful people in the world, the people who are naturally advantaged by the current unjust systems, you think that I just don't understand. You don't think that they should stand up for victims?
No, I think everybody should.
Right, but should white men stand up for victims?
They would be included amongst everybody.
Yeah, but do you think that they might have outsized responsibility because they have outsized power?
No, I just base it on the content.
Right, exactly. So we both agree then that what matters.
Right, we just based it on the content. You just brought up, so why would white men could not be less relevant? That's my point. We agree. Whether it's a white man or a black female, the abuse is the abuse. And the abuse of power can be more powerful if this person has a much greater platform. And my point is, your call to action, as you just did now, I'm glad that we've clarified, is to white men to correct these institutional forms of discrimination. And that is the presupposition of your new rules and guidelines when dictating what speech is and is not allowed. And it doesn't take into account individuals.
I just think that white men do need to stand up for victims of abuse.
Right. How about good men?
Yeah, all good men need to stand up for victims of abuse.
Why not good men? Do you not consider yourself amongst them?
Because they are the ones who are unnaturally privileged in this system, and so they need to be the ones willing to stand up. Whether it's sexual assault and harassment, whether it's online abuse, white men who control a lot of things in this world do need to stand up and stand with victims. That seems pretty reasonable. You know, it's the same way that major politicians who hold power in countries around the world need to stand up for victims of abuse and for human rights.
Okay, so would you believe when Barack Obama was president that this man was more powerful than, say, the white man tilling the cornfields?
I'm not sure about what I would say is that the president is more powerful than an average citizen. Yes.
A black president, again, because you said white men need to fix this problem. I said, how about good men, right? A black president, Barack Obama, would he, and you just use politicians as an example. I'm following your logic trail.
Yeah,
We're serving the common master.
But he sure did. Whereas what most white men have not, or a lot of white men have not stood up against problems the way that they need to.
There it is.
Yeah.
So this is This is what you've written about in your article, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. And you don't see that as being written through the prism of race.
No, I'm saying that white men need to.
That's fine. We can let that stand where it is. We disagree. I think that saying white men specifically and only seeing systems of power through the prism of race is seeing it through the prism of race. You don't. So perfect world here.
But what you're trying to do is race as if it's not a problem in this country. And that's just ridiculously false.
No, I didn't do that.
So if you really think that everyone is already treated equally and so everyone should stand up equally for abuse, then you clearly have a misguided view of the world.
You don't think that everyone should equally stand up in the face of abuse.
I sure do, but I sure don't think that everyone is equally privileged to stand up, and that's why those with more power.
I don't believe that everyone is equally privileged. On that, we agree. I simply don't see privilege exclusively through the lenses of race and gender. My point is there are people who can be abused on these social media platforms simply for having unpopular views, regardless of whether white, black, gay, straight, trans, male, female. That's my point, and it happens every day. And you see that all the time. Unpopular viewpoints, it's a pendulum that swings, for example. You know, right now, yours would be less popular amongst many people in the tech community or people with social media who would advocate for more open platforms. I think your views shouldn't be censored. To use your words, I think you should be as free to express it as I am. And I would like to see rules from Facebook and Twitter, and I would absolutely, even if you @replied me 1,000 times a day, which would likely be a violation of their guidelines, I would defend your right to do it. You're the one advocating the opposite, and you're advocating the opposite through your article, again, exclusively through the prism of race and gender. And,
you're right. I'm advocating against abuse. You nailed it.
Yes. Yes, you're advocating against abuse and attributing abuse exclusively to people of a given race or gender and a system of classes. You just asked.
Yeah,
listen, we're not going to read. So let's go back. Let's finalize on this. Closing thoughts. What happens in Facebook, Twitter, YouTube in your perfect world? What happens right now? What is YouTube, for example, missing?
My article was about Facebook and Twitter. I think YouTube
what is
has
Facebook and Twitter
complicated
missing?
Problems. Facebook needs to create policies that understand where privilege lies and does not protect people or does not allow abuse of certain races just because there's a modifier like age attached to them.
Yeah.
And Twitter needs to create better rules to prevent abuse through the reply system.
Sure. Yeah.
That's
you write for a major publication like TechCrunch, and we're an independent outlet. So I would love to see you go on your own and see where the privilege lies. That's my point. We just need to let free speech be free speech for all, regardless of race, gender, orientation. Then it becomes a really simple issue. May sound reductive. Hey, maybe it is. Either free speech applies across the board.
It sounds like it means that people who are abused don't need any special help.
Yeah, I know. When you hear it that way, if you hear it through the ears of race, you would hear me saying that people should be abused. Josh, thank you so much. We'll have you back, and we'll talk about this more. I'm sure you'll write about it, no doubt. People, you can comment and see where your opinions line up. I appreciate Josh coming on here. It's very difficult often for us to get people with opposing viewpoints to discuss these issues. I really do appreciate it. Josh, thank you very much, sir, and we'll have you back. Hey, did you like this video? What, you didn't? Oh, you're a cat person? Well, that makes sense. Disregard him and or her/Z. Everyone else, hit the subscribe button and leave your comment below as to why you like this video. Hey, you know what? Crazy cat, you can get back. You can comment below too as to why you don't like it.